Hello there, welcome to my review of the Rockford Files Season 2, Episode 11, Pastoria Prime Pick. Written by Gordon T. Dawson and directed by Lawrence Downey. The episode begins with Jim getting a tow after the Firebird has let him down. The tow truck driver is taking him into New Pastoria, where Jim is looking for a bounty, Ronnie Brown. He grabs some lunch in the local diner and asks the sheriff, who's sitting at the counter.
My name's Larry Metcalf. I'm looking for the beneficiary of a recent policy holder named Ronnie Brown.
No.
Are you sure? A man named Creekmore said he thought he gave him a lift into town.
The tow driver, Vern, comes in and lets Jim know his car needs parts he doesn't have and it's gonna take a while and cost him, so he'd better check in at the local motel. When Jim calls his machine, he finds out the guy he was looking for has come back and his client is now unwilling to pay him. As Jim is checking in, he finds someone else's case in his room and helps the check-in girl carry it outside, where a photographer is waiting to take a candid photo. After a sob story from her, he's accosted by her cop fiancé, played by our Colombo connection William Lucking, who turned up in Colombo Goes to College. Vern eventually finds Rockford and gives him an outlandish estimate about how much the car repairs are going to be. Rockford notices that the damage to his car seems to have been done deliberately. He goes to find the sheriff again to report it, only to discover the sheriff he met is retired and there's a new sheriff in town. Jim finds the new sheriff, Gladish, and he's helpful and appreciative of Jim telling him what's been going on since he got into town. So far, it's a less than standard setup purely because of how uninteresting everything is. There's a few moments of small drama, but it's hard to see where this is going or how it is going to be engaging. The only alarm bell is how friendly the sheriff is, as we know from experience with the Rockford Files that any warmth the cops show to Jim usually leads to trouble. Sure enough, trouble arrives in the form of 3 masked men who burst into Jim's room demanding the case he found, which happens to be full of drugs. 2 of the men leave with the drugs, while the other pins Rockford down until the check-in girl Rita arrives, and soon after her cop fiancé, resulting in the masked hood fleeing and Jim doing the same moments later in Rita's car. After evading the cop, he gets stuck and has to go on foot, not realizing the case full of drugs has made its way back into his possession in the back of Rita's car, and it now has his pseudonymous initials on it. This episode has gone from 0 to 100 in the space of a few minutes, and while it was a risk having such a slow burn, it's great to see the show take this risk in its second season. It could have easily put new viewers off with this strategy, but it works for new and regular viewers in 2 different ways. New viewers wouldn't have a clue what's going on and so would be intrigued to see what was happening, only to be rewarded with an explosive set piece, while regular viewers would understand this isn't how the episode usually begins and so would know something special was just around the corner, and they'd be right. Jim finds his way to the retired sheriff, Emmett Bird, and while Jim's explaining what's happened, the sheriff hears over his police scanner that Jim's alias is wanted for drug trafficking. Sheriff Gladish picks him up and Jim tries to explain the situation by telling the truth about who he really is.
My initials are JR for James Rockford. I'm a private investigator and I work with the LA police.
But it's no good, which gives Rockford the idea that he's being fitted up, as it's his phony initials that someone put on the case. This doesn't really help him, however, and even the arrival of Beth is not enough to get him out of jail. Jim then gets a visit from the mayor, who also happens to be Rita's mother, and is just as crooked as the sheriff.
If you agree, I'll drop the attempted kidnapping and contributing charges.
The DA is not much better, as he offers to drop all but the bribery and car theft charges for a $15,000 fine.
If your client declines the county's generosity, I'll prosecute all charges to the fullest.
Whether Jim's suspicions are founded or not are revealed in the next scene, where the sheriff and the DA listen in to Jim and Beth's conversation via a bug in his cell.
It wouldn't surprise me if this ripoff went all the way up to the judge.
In court, the DA steamrolls the proceedings with a full list of charges, and the judge sets a trial date. Thanks to the information from Bird, Jim is able to work out he was set up from the start, all the way back in LA, on a phony case to get him to New Pastoria in order to fleece him. Vern, the tow driver, the mayor, her daughter, the DA, Sheriff Gladish, and his deputy are all in on the scam, and this is not the first person they've run this con on.
Your law engineered over 500 felony convictions in 2 years.
New Pretoria's recent success is entirely down to this scam. Jim, Rocky and Beth try to make a run for it with the evidence they have, but the cops arrive and arrest Beth and Rocky. Jim has no option but to turn to Sheriff Bird for help, this time convincing him not to turn him in. But he does take him to the judge.
Look, just hear the man out. Then I'll do whatever you say.
Despite the evidence, the judge has a hard time accepting it's true, as he prides himself on his toughness, and so to be confronted with the fact that he's been handing out harsh sentences to innocent people is beyond the pale for him.
Half the crime in this country is caused by lenient judges. Thank God I'm not one of them.
Russ, what if it's true?
This entire second act is fast-paced, full of action, and genuinely tense, as it seems like with all the authorities crooked and a judge who might as well be due to his own guilt, Jim might be really in trouble here. The justification for the judge to not want to help is beautifully done. He is an honest man, but too honest for his own good, and too dogmatic about his beliefs regarding the legal system. Watching his crisis of faith and how it plays into the story is a remarkable bit of writing. It's also fascinating to see the show take on police and local government corruption, a subject which has only been dabbled with in the past. Here, those involved show no remorse, and their motives are not simply to help the town be a success, even though that's still no justification, but to purely enrich themselves and plump up their own reputations. It also shows how easy it is for a few bad people in the right places to be pretty unstoppable, having managed to work this con on so many people before targeting Jim, and how difficult it is for the honest townsfolk to do anything about it, even after they become aware of it. Thanks to Jim's detection skills, he's able to convince the judge to go with him to see how the scam works. And as Jim predicted, Vern is right where he's supposed to be, waiting for the next mark, and the judge is convinced. Unfortunately, he and Bird plan to handle it themselves, which goes awry, but thankfully Jim's quick thinking allows them to get the upper hand on the crooked cops, in true Smokey and the Bandit fashion. With everyone rounded up, the mayor makes a good, although not justifiable, point.
Built on the bodies of a lot of innocent people.
Is there a town which hasn't been built that way, Mr. Rockford?
And Rockford is free and clear. This is a fantastic episode that seems to build on the groundwork laid by the Great Blue Lake Land and Development Company of corruption in a small town, but takes it up several notches with genuine jeopardy. Whereas that episode felt like Jim was always going to get out of it, as he was largely one step ahead, here he's on the back foot for most of the episode. The stakes are higher and the villains more dangerous. His usual safety net of Rocky, Beth and Dennis are taken out of the picture, and he's forced to trust strangers who might well be part of the scam. The way the story wraps up might seem a little rushed, but it does make sense as part of the rest of the story, and even with the Looney Tunes defeat of the crooked cops, I think it still works. It manages to tackle a very serious subject of legal and political malfeasance and present it in a way that never feels preachy, challenging the audience to look at their own moral compass through the character of the judge and the mayor's closing words. It's yet another example of the show's versatility and bravery. My only complaint being that it should have been a season finale, so you couldn't be sure whether Jim would clear his name by the end of the episode until it happens. But this is easily a 5 out of 5 for me. Thank you. Goodbye.